Hello, testing the current setup because I'm not sure if focus on your live stream and let YouTube insert ads for you. Dismiss. This is something different. All right. I don't know if people are there. Let me see. There is someone on the stream. If the audio is there, it would be good to confirm. Let me wait for some more time before I start. In the meantime, let me see if I can basically create a directory. So I'm inside code tutorials, right? So what I want to do is in this video today, set up a whole Docker setup, which is very useful, easy to do development on. Now I'm going to extend from this particular repository. If you go to my GitHub profile, you will see I have this repository where I have made this entire Docker Compose, which is doing a lot of things. I have Nginx over here, which is required for running the web. This is my web server. Then I have my PHP service, which is obviously required for Laravel. MySQL, our database, we need a composer service because I am using composer as a different container. I'm trying to separate whatever is a different process. Then we have a node container, which will be used for any kind of asset compilation. And then we also have PHPMyAdmin so that it is easy for us to look at the database. I'm not then relying on any client software to install and then go through that. So that eases the thing. Okay. And then we have Artisan. This is a nice to have thing. Basically, what I have done is because the commands become quite big, right? I have created this container with in a service which I can easily call for any Artisan commands. We have Redis in place and we have Mailpit. Mailpit is used to hook into the mailing system, and whatever mails are being sent from our Laravel application will be captured over here. So let's go step by step. I'm not sure how much time it will take, so we will go slowly. I will try to explain as much as possible about each and everything, and hope this we are able to finish the entire setup. If not, I will do a part 2. I'm trying to not exceed more than half an hour, 45 minutes. Okay, and so let's get started. Now, for those of you who are completely new to Docker, I would say this is not the perfect tutorial for you because I am coming with some expectations that you are a little familiar with Docker. Otherwise, this tutorial will be, or this video will be, very difficult for you to follow. And yeah, I have a few shortcuts. For example, I have D, which basically does Docker for me. So I don't need to type Docker every time. I can just do D. And similarly, I have one more shortcut, which is doc, which is same as Docker Compose. Okay, so these are the two shortcuts which I'm going to use pretty frequently, and so I thought it makes sense for you to know. Um, One more thing, I don't have anything installed on my machine in terms of either PHP, Nginx, Apache, nothing. If I go to my terminal, you can see I don't have PHP. So I'm completely this installation is completely clean, and what we will do is follow certain processes which will allow us to continue to work without having anything in our machine. That's the whole idea. Okay. Now, there is an important and interesting catch 22 situation, which is for us to install Laravel, we need Composer, and Composer will only work when we have PHP. Otherwise, how do we have Composer on our system? So then how do we solve this problem? And that is something which we are going to do first, and like we are going to address that problem as our first thing. So what you can do is we can run containers one time. I would say like they are one time containers through which we can do certain activity and then we can get rid of that container. Okay. Use and throw kind of thing. So I'll type out a command. So docker run, we are telling Docker to run a command. Now, after running the command, I want the container to be removed. So I pass a flag, which is rm. Then I pass a -v. I'm not sure if it is capital or small. I think it should be small. Um, Small v. And what will happen is, because Docker has a file system mapping, what I want to do is tell Docker that whatever command you execute, you create a volume, a temporary volume for that particular container. And the source folder is this, and it maps to the app folder of my container. And now which image do I need to use? I will use Composer, and I'll execute the command. Oops. Let me name that project maybe Laravel Docker. Okay, my Docker is not allowing me to write. I think I know this problem. This is something to do with the permissions of, this is a new user which I created so that I can show you a complete um, clean installation kind of thing. I only hope. Yeah. So what happens is when you have installed Docker, initially it might ask you to run all the commands using root privileges, which is not something which ideally we would like to do. And so we should have a group called Docker. Yes. So what happens is Docker runs on a user group called Docker. And what we want to do is add our own user, the current user, right, to that group so that these permission issues don't come in. Now, yes, if you want to ensure that these changes are in effect, right, you may have to log out on a normal machine, but if you're running a VM somewhere, right, you may not want to restart. So what you can do is new group Docker. And now if I run that command, it will start to download everything. And you can see this is installing Laravel. This is almost as if you are doing Composer create project Laravel /Laravel. And we were able to do that with no PHP composer on our machine. Okay, this is Laravel 11, so you can see it uses SQLite. It did the migration for you as well. And yeah, so now if I do docker ps, this is a Docker um, container which I was playing around with. So let me remove that. Docker stop, I think, container, and then E2. Okay. Maybe I'll go with the DB admin name. Okay. Now if I do docker ps, no containers are running, so that is fine. Okay. So we have our new folder, which is Laravel Docker. Now, one important thing to note is our user is completely root, because what happens is Composer runs as a root user, and so whatever um, permissions or ownership to those files are created during the Composer install are all root user. But later on we will change that so that we don't hit that problem. Otherwise the log file will not get created and you will have certain other kinds of problems as well. Okay. Yes, I trust this. And yeah, these are all fine, working as expected. So now let me start with a Docker Compose file. Okay, and we immediately get this problem of permission. So why don't we do one thing for now? My user, I forgot, is it developer dollar user? Developer, I think. Yeah, that's developer, and then this basically what it does is put everything as owner as me, this current developer, so current user. So we should not have any problem now. I can create a file, docker compose.yml. Yes, and now we need to start creating our Docker Compose with the different services. So what is the first thing that we would like to do? I will continue to refer this file because there are certain things which I have already figured out, and if I don't do that, it will be a lot of typing. Okay, so then let's start with first creating services, and we'll create the first service. First of all, the version 3.9. Okay, and inside my service definitions, we will have Nginx. Now we have something called as container name. This is similar to, if you see what I was doing over here, it has a name. Okay, if I don't provide a container name, it's not a problem. The only thing is it will pick up something very random, which can be a bit difficult later on to use in the name, right? So we will not use that. We will do container name, and you can just say Nginx. That should be fine as well. We don't need to be very creative about it. I think the simpler it is, what happens is during the development, it will be easy for you. Sometimes I even do PN and stuff around that so that it is easy to quickly type that out. Okay. The next thing is that I can spin up a new Nginx service. So for any kind of container hub.docker, if we go over here, yeah, Nginx. So this is the official one when you have these badges. Okay, and some name is some Nginx. If you see, we have a very similar command that we created to do composer create project. Now what they're doing is creating that container, some content in a particular folder mapped to user share Nginx HTML, and it runs as a daemon Nginx, which is fine. It will allow me to run that Nginx thing, but I want some custom configurations. It will be required because I am going to point that to a different folder, which is our typical Laravel application wants you to point the main web server to index.php inside public. So we will have to make some custom configurations. So let's just do that. I'll refer to this. So inside Docker, what I typically do is I have this folder where I put my custom configurations. I have two files over here. One is the Nginx Docker file. And if you see what I'm doing over here is saying that, and I want to use this Alpine 3.17 slim container, image. Okay, and it is always good to be very specific with your container version. Now I know Nginx is not a big problem for me. Even if I would have done latest, it should have worked, but as best practices, it is good to have a version number instead of something which is constantly changing. Like latest will mean whenever you are building your entire Docker image, right, it will pull the latest one, and you may not have tested it. You may be running the older version of a container. So yeah, this needs to be specific. And then I have a configuration where what I'm doing is I'm listening to port 80, and then these are stuff I have taken from Laravel documentation as well. But I'm basically using fast CGI pass, and I'm listening to port 9000, which will be the port where my PHP will be running. Okay, and if you see, I'm looking for index.php. Where is it? Try files, $URI, index.php query string. This is how the Laravel's thing works. And I am also saying that my root is var www html public. So these are some of the configurations that we need to put in our Nginx. So let's go ahead and do that. I have a chat. Let me see. Hey Nizam, hello. How are you? Thanks for joining. All right. So first of all, I'll create this thing. Copy raw. And I'll have Docker. Inside that Nginx. And inside that I'll have nginx.docker file. Okay. And because I'm doing this, I need the config file as well. So I'll just copy that file as well. Again, I would say that, just copy the stuff which is already there in the repository. Um, this is mostly taken from Laravel's docs and a small modification here and there based on some prompts that I had given to ChatGPT. But yeah, you can find this configuration in multiple places. Nothing very extraordinary, to be very frank. Okay. Um, right. This is there. Now, what we will do is, because we have our image definition, we need to also tell that we'll need to tell Docker that we need to use an image which will be which you need to build. Okay, so we define a build argument. In that build argument, we need to provide a context. I will say that the context, basically where the folder is, or rather the file is inside my Docker Nginx, because that's the folder structure that we created. And then we need to mention the Docker file. The Docker file is nginx.docker file. Okay. Now, what next? Nginx needs to open up certain ports so that the application is able to run on that particular port. So what I will do is, for now, say that the application will run on 9000 and internally it is port 80. Now, how that works is, if you are new to this concept, just for others who already know, hold on a bit. So we have Docker container. Let's just say these are two different windows. Now this is my container. Okay, on the right hand side we have our container, and on the left hand side we have our host, which is kind of running things. Now what we need to do is tell Docker that this container, whatever is the output, let's just say, because we are running Nginx, right? That port is 80. So this container's port 80 needs to be mapped to my host's port 9000. I can do this as 80 as well, and I'll show you that it is completely possible. But for now, what is happening is this container, this Nginx container, will operate on 80, and that 80 port is opened for the host on 9000. That's the mapping. Okay. So once that mapping is done, we are going to define a volume. The volume is important because the container needs to get the code base. So I'll do dot, and then I'll do that mapping inside var www html. Okay. The reason is this entire code base goes inside var www html, which means the public folder is like this on that particular container. And we have already, if you remember, mentioned inside our Docker compose, the Nginx config file, that my root for Nginx is var www html public. So this is where it will look for the index.html to run. So this is how we are setting things up. Okay, Nizam is asking, once the Docker config done, are you going to deploy it to the server? Well, I'm not in the plan to deploy it to the server today, because this is not a configuration which is production ready. This is more like handling your development needs. Production grade containers and setups are a little different. So yeah, long story short, no, today I'm not going to deploy it on any live server. Okay, there are a few more questions. In order to deploy via Docker, it must be using CI/CD. Well, Nizam, that's a good question. Um, it is not necessary to have CI/CD in place. You can do the deployment manually as well. And I have been running Docker containers on my own Amazon EC2 instance manually. But then, yes, if it is Dockerized, it does make your life easy if you have a CI/CD in place. I right now, for most of our office projects, we are completely on a CI/CD pipeline, so things are very smooth. We don't need to worry about it. Just commit the code, and the branch can be merged to master, and then we click a button, and everything is deployed. Okay, let's get back to work. So the configuration is here, Nginx, blah, blah, blah. Now, what else do we need to do? The volume is created. So why don't we give it a shot? I think um, we should be able to get something. So Docker compose up. And so now I think I need to, is already in use. I'll need to see what is the exact command to delete all the containers. Delete all containers, Docker. Mm-hmm. Remove all containers. Yes, Docker RMI. This is image prune. Docker container stop. Docker container stop. RMRF. Remove all containers. Okay, let me try this one because I'm not running any containers as of now, so I can clearly. Okay, there were quite a few. All right. Um, so now if I do Docker compose up, something is happening and it exited. It exited saying host not found in upstream PHP, which means the container started, it came over here, it took that config file, it went over here, and then it failed somewhere in here. That means if I somehow am able to satisfy this requirement, we should be fine. And I know what the problem is. Our PHP container is not running. Nginx is trying to find a file which doesn't exist. Okay. I have HTML in here. No, it is only looking for PHP. So we will create that. Let's go back to our compose. We'll have one more service called PHP container name. And then I will again have some build parameters for this. I'll need the volume, and we will share the same volume that we have for Nginx because they are going to look for the same thing. And I need to define a network, and I will tell you why. So when Docker Compose is created, all these services, there will be multiple services which will be running, and for these services to talk to each other properly, easily, what Docker will do is create a network. And if we define that network, then we have the ability to also say that these services belong to this particular network. And this is very helpful if you want, in a very complex scenario, you have a compose where there are applications which are on different networks, a private, some kind of, like we typically do in a VPC, where there is private network, public network, and then you can play around with things, complicated ones. I haven't done it, but you can try. But what we will do over here is we will have an app network thing. This is the name of our network. Sorry, this is, yeah, that we have defined. And I'll say appnet. Okay. And then what I will need to do is just in my services say that this service belongs to this network. Okay. Now the build config, the build context. I'll just copy this, paste it over here. The context will be docker/php, and we will have a PHP Docker file. So let us create that inside Docker php/this. Okay. Now let's go to our, this is not required anymore. Let's go to our PHP Docker file. I'll first copy this and paste it here, and let's understand what we are doing over here. Hub.docker. Okay, I can do PHP over here, right? And we should get the official page of Docker. Now, as you can see, we have the official Docker image documentation. Create a Docker file from this, copy, and then your script, a lot of stuff. And what the newest one, latest one will be what, 8.3 something. I should find one. 8.3. Right. And you need to keep an eye on these image sizes. So I am using Alpine. Okay. And what happens is the Alpine images are quite small because they have very less additional softwares. They are very slim versions. So they are generally very small. However, yeah, if you have custom requirements, you may have to install a lot of things inside these images because they don't come with too many softwares pre-installed. Okay, now what are we doing over here? Again, we have a PHP image with this version. Then we are creating a folder called var.www.html. Okay, then this is basically to create a user and kind of map the current user ID to the Docker's containers thing. I won't say I completely understand this start to end. However, if you don't do this, you'll be in a constant problem where files are getting created through Docker container and they have a different ID, and then you are on your host working with a different ID, and so you are not able to write to it, and you will get file permission issues. So we are solving that over here, and then I'm also giving www data permissions to these two folders, and additionally I am installing PDO and PDO-MySQL because my end goal is to use the MySQL database. Okay, so now with this, I think if I try again, now this time this will build the PHP container as well. Almost there. And now we have some problem. Fail to solve process this CHOWN. Okay, did not complete successfully. What if I hold on to it for some time? Let me see. So I think what could be a problem is, when I'm using an existing project and the ownership problem doesn't come. Yeah, that thing passed because now it is running the PDU MySQL thing. So I'll have to see how that problem needs to be solved. I thought I solved that using these two lines, but looks like that's not the case for a fresh install. So I'll have to dig a little deeper into it. But yeah. Okay. And now that these two things are running and they are not exiting, this basically means that they are running properly. I can open up a new terminal and do docker ps. Oh yes, that will continue to be a problem. Hmm, I'll have to look for user group, or can I do history? Right. New group docker, right. If I do this, I should be able to do docker ps now. Yeah. Okay. So this is working, and we can see that these two containers are running. The ports are also visible. So I can see that PHP is running on port 9000, and I have Nginx, which is running on port 80 TCP mapped to 9000, which basically means if I do localhost, not the HTTPS, 9000, right, we are in here. I can see the Laravel error page, which is a good thing. Even though it is failing, I can say that the application is running. So I'll just need to figure out the problem of file permissions, lsal. This is all developer. If I do something like, let me first get into the shell of the Docker container where the application is running. So I'll go inside PHP. I can do docker exec it, that is interactive. So execute interactive. Then we give the container name. This is where short names help, PHP. And then if I do sh, I am now inside the container. If I do ls, I can see the code base inside the container, and we are in a problem. Um, Everything is kind of weird. So why don't we do one thing? Okay. All right. So now one more thing which I just realized is typically um, in a Ubuntu machine, when you are using the first user, you get 1000 as the user ID. But now this time it seems I am on user ID 1001, and that's the reason it initially failed. So now if I do 1001 for this particular thing, I'm sure this will work. I can do a control C and then the container will stop. So now if I do docker ps or dps, nothing is running. Docker container. No, I don't need to do that. So I'll just spin up again. And this time, what I will do is I will pass -d as a flag. Oh, no, hold on. Docker down. Down will bring down everything. And let me uncomment this with the 1001 as the user ID and see if this works. Up. And yeah. Let's see. All right. This is up. I can do docker ps and see that the two containers are running. And if I try to go inside the docker container, which is docker exe clsal, will this now work? If not, then yeah, okay. I'll have to fix that in some other way. For now, what I will do is change owner ww data, because that's what Nginx will run on. So I'll give storage and bootstrap cache. Now let's see. All right, the thing changed, which basically means the log files are getting created. That problem is solved. Attempt to write a read-only database. That is completely fine. I guess I can even do, where is the file created? It's inside the database as database SQLite. Yes. Now it should work because that permission is given. Right. And we have our Laravel application welcome screen visible. Now, a quick tip. I'll do docker compose down. And I was telling you, right, the host thing. So if I make this 80 pointing to 80, I'll bring up the entire setup again. Okay. Now it doesn't run on 9000. However, if I do localhost, I can see this running. So that's the beauty. I can point it to any port, and yeah, it will be available on my host as well. Okay. So where are we with time? We are about 42 minutes, so we have some time still. We can make certain things. Why don't we add our MySQL service? This is a very straightforward one. MySQLs are, if you're not making any major configuration changes, they are very straightforward. Okay. In here, you will also see I'm using some dollar app port kind of stuff. And I have given it in my documentation that I'm using the environments variables. So you can use that. What happens is it generally makes things easy for you to manage, and you don't need to even commit them, which is a safer way to do things. And we can actually use it. So let's just start with that particular thing. MySQL, yeah, no, I will say just DB. Okay, container name is DB. And this time you will see I have directly used image. Unlike the PHP and the Nginx configurations where I did a build and then I passed the context and the file name, in here I'm just saying use this image. So Docker will go into Docker Hub, will look for the latest version of MariaDB, pull it, and we are done. No custom configurations required. Now in here, ports, I can potentially do that. So this is the default. If I don't define this in here, then what it will do is it will take 3306 as the default. For now, let's just go with this directly. Okay. And volume. This is important. MySQL, or rather, let me show you instead of first doing that, because otherwise you won't understand the problem. And these are some environment stuff that I want. Okay, so now MariaDB or MySQL does allow us to run with a empty root password mode, but that is not enabled by default. So we need to pass that as an environment variable. And I'm saying that the database which I want is, let's say, Laravel Docker. Okay. So if everything is correct, I can bring down the compose and then spin it back up. Now, if I do docker ps, which is dps, I can see I have 3 containers running. All right. So now the question is, can I connect to that thing inside my env? Perfect. MySQL. I need to comment out, uncomment certain things. The host will be MySQL, and I will tell you what that host means, and something which is interesting to know if you're not already aware. But this is my Docker configuration. Sorry, my env for Laravel. Now let's go into our container running Laravel and see if I am able to run my migration. So I can do docker exec interactive php sh. I'm here, php artisan migrate. It's taking a bit time. Wonder what it is doing. I hope it's still running. Okay, so finally it gave away, and it is complaining about a network address. Why is that? It's inside the same network. I think this happened because DB. I need to make it MySQL, or I can change it over here. So I'll make that MySQL doc down, and I'll do doc up dash D. Okay, again I have a problem, and I don't remember the command to clear out all the containers. Pa, 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 pa. Mm, container all? No, ls all. Right. So I have a problem with which one? Particularly DB, right? It says it's already in use. Okay, but I did a Docker down, so it should have removed that, but it didn't. I wonder why. Okay, I'll just do Docker container stop DB. Okay, it is still running. No. Um, so this will again complain. What happened? Yeah, this is creating a problem. Let me again see how can I Docker uh, delete all containers, stop all containers. Yeah, I'll have to memorize this particular command. Docker RMI stop. Let's see. Okay, everything is gone. Docker container ls all. Hmm. So I have a stop, and then if I do remove, right, and then now I don't have any container. So then docker up d, oh sorry, doc up, docker compose up d, and I have all three running. Let me get inside the container. So exec, right, I'm here, PHP artisan migrate. And now I have three tables. How can we be sure that this is inside the MySQL database? Let's try to get that. What I will do is docker exec db. So now I am inside MySQL. ls, yep, MySQL dash u root dash p, and I'm inside the MySQL thing. So show databases. I can see my database, Laravel, Docker, show tables, and we have quite a few things. Now, what I will do is let's just do doc down. With doc down, let me see. I hope this time I don't have any containers lying around. I don't. Okay, so now if I do docker compose up dash d, I can see all the containers running. And if I go inside my DB, obviously it will need me to log in again. Show databases. Oh, I can see that use Laravel Docker. Ah, my bad. I should have created something in there for you to understand that what will happen is the data goes away. I'm so sorry. I can quickly show you by doing something over here. PHP artisan tinker. Okay, user create. I don't know if I'll be able to do that quickly. Amitav, email. And password is password. There's a syntax error somewhere. User create. Expecting comma. Oh, yeah. Base table not found. Users doesn't exist. All right. At least, yeah, because we did run the migration, right? So I can do PHP artisan migrate. So I think this also tells you that the user table was not present, although we had created that. Can I go to Tinker, add that user, right? I can see this user now. If I go back to my shell, do MySQL dash u root dash p use, and I'll do select star from users. I can see this user. Now let's go docker down. Okay, and we'll spin up everything. Come back over here. Obviously, now I'll need to retype everything. Root and do use Laravel Docker, and then select star from users, and the table itself doesn't exist. Now we did insert some data, and right now it is saying the table doesn't exist. So this means every time we do a Docker down, everything is going away. So how do we retain that? That's where we need to have this volume. I know this took time, and that's why I was saying that maybe today we will not be able to complete the entire setup, but it is important to understand every piece of these components. Okay. So I'm mapping something inside my Docker data MySQL folder to the var lib MySQL. Okay. So let's try that out. Where are we? DPS. Okay, they are running. So doc down. I'll bring them down and then up dash D. All of them are running. Why don't we do PHP sh, PHP artisan, migrate. Now, obviously, after that, I won't find those command inside my Tinker. So I'll create maybe one user again. Could have done a seeder, actually. Oops. And okay, this is done. If I go to my container, I can see this thing. And if I go in my VS Code, you will see inside the MySQL data, MySQL folder, there are quite a few files created over here. Okay, you have a Laravel Docker folder as well. I have my MySQL folder, quite a few things. Now, if I do doc down and if I do doc up, and if demo gods are with me, ideally, I should see that thing still in my database. Use Laravel Docker show tables. Yes. And select star from users. Right. So we have retained our user, which we had created. And if I go to my folder, I'll go inside code, R&D, no, sorry, tutorials, this data folder. You'll see I have the entire MySQL's data folder mapped over here. This is not something which I can write to because this is something which the container is writing, but I don't need to worry about it. This is something which they are doing. And with this, you can see we are able to run our application. I can do something like user and I can get the list of things, and I'm basically changing on my host machine and I can see things happening over here. So this entire setup is working. Just because I couldn't show you the entire data, right? Yeah. So as you can see, this is running. This is all fine. One small thing before we leave is right now it is very difficult for us to go inside the terminal and look at the database, right? So what I will do is get this. This is a very straightforward thing. I'll show you after I have that ready. No, no, compose. So PHPMyAdmin, this is an application which allows us to look at the database, make queries, edit, delete records, and a lot of stuff. So my container name will be dbadmin. Now this is something new. I will not touch it right now. Just get rid of that. Um, Again, image is PHPMyAdmin, so it will directly pull from Docker Hub. Port, I'm saying that it should run on 8080. Network is the same. Root password, MySQL root password. User is root. MySQL root password is empty, and I think this is also empty. Should work. Let me see. So I'll just do docker down, and then I'll do docker up -d. And it says a network with, okay, appnet exists but couldn't create. Docker ps and dbadmin is running. That's fine. Let's see if I'm able to get that. Yep. So this is the interface, and I can see my database over here, and I can see that user that I created. So you see, this is the um, basic setup that I was planning to show you. We have how many services? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 services running. This is my Nginx, a custom build which is using the Nginx Docker file. We have some configurations there. We have PHP with a custom configuration. We looked at the volumes, network, and then we looked at how MySQL can be instantiated, and then what is the role, the important role of volumes, and how we need to persist that data of my database, and then this PHPMyAdmin to give us this beautiful interface to work with. So yeah, that's about it, guys. That's what I wanted to cover in this video. It's already 1 hour, so I'm kind of stopping it right now, but in part 2 maybe I will add a couple more services and look at some important aspects of the compose for easy development experience. So yeah, that's about it, guys. Thank you. See you soon.